The tow truck was already moving toward the black SUV when Officer Daniel Carter made one decision that would change everything. Marcus Reed heard the warning lights behind him before he saw the cruiser. He slowed his vehicle, signaled, and pulled onto the shoulder of the quiet Ohio highway. It was just after 10 a.m., and traffic was light. Marcus kept both hands visible on the steering wheel as Officer Carter approached. "License and registration," Carter said. Marcus handed them over without argument. Carter studied the documents, then looked through the windshield at Marcus. "Where are you headed?" "Cincinnati," Marcus replied. "Work?" Carter glanced back at the SUV. "This vehicle yours?" "Not exactly." That answer seemed to change the officer's attitude. Carter stepped closer to the driver's window. "Not exactly." Marcus nodded. "It belongs to my employer." Carter looked at the paperwork again. "Your employer?" "Yes, sir." Marcus remained calm, but Carter's questions became sharper. He asked why Marcus was driving an SUV that did not appear to be registered in his name. Marcus explained that he had already provided the required documents. Carter told him that the vehicle appeared to have a registration issue and that he needed to remain outside the vehicle while the situation was reviewed. Marcus slowly stepped out. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply asked, "Did you verify the plate?" Carter looked at him. "I know how to run a plate." "I understand," Marcus said. "I'm just asking if you verified it." Carter's expression hardened. "You don't need to tell me how to do my job." Marcus paused. "I wasn't." For several seconds, neither man spoke. Carter returned to his cruiser and entered something into the computer. Marcus stood beside his SUV, watching traffic pass. A few minutes later, Carter walked back and told him the vehicle would be towed. Marcus looked toward the road, then back at the officer. "You're sure?" "Yes." "Before you do that, you should make one more call." Carter frowned. "To who?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, but he did not make the call himself. "The number listed with the vehicle." "Records," he said. Carter shook his head. "We're not playing games here." A tow truck appeared in the distance several minutes later. Carter pointed toward the SUV as the driver pulled onto the shoulder. Marcus watched the truck approach, then quietly said, "Officer Carter, once that truck touches this vehicle, this situation is going to become much bigger than a traffic stop." Carter stared at him. "Is that supposed to scare me?" "No," Marcus replied. "It's supposed to give you one last chance to check." Carter turned toward the tow truck and waved the driver forward. The truck began backing into position. Marcus remained completely still. He knew something Carter didn't, and within minutes, the officer would discover that the vehicle he was so determined to tow was never supposed to be on that tow truck in the first place. The tow truck driver stopped a few feet from the black SUV and lowered his window. "Where do you want it to hook up?" he asked. Officer Daniel Carter pointed toward the vehicle. "Just get it ready. I will give you the rest of the information." The driver, Tommy Hayes, nodded, but before he stepped out, he looked at Marcus Reed. Something about the situation did not feel like an ordinary traffic stop. Marcus remained beside his SUV, calm and composed. He looked at Tommy and said, "Before you connect anything, I would recommend checking the vehicle information one more time." Tommy glanced at Carter. "Is there a problem with the paperwork?" Carter answered immediately. "There is a registration issue." "I already checked it." Tommy slowly climbed down from the truck. "All right, I just want to make sure everything is correct. My company requires us to verify the vehicle before we move it." Carter gave him a frustrated look. "You have your instructions. Just do the job." Tommy walked toward the SUV, but as he came closer, he noticed a small marking near the rear window. It was easy to miss unless someone knew what to look for. Tommy stopped for a moment. He had seen similar markings on government vehicles during previous towing assignments. He walked around the back of the SUV and looked at the license plate again. Then he returned to Carter. "Officer, did you check the full vehicle record?" Carter folded his arms. "I told you I checked it." Tommy lowered his voice. "I'm asking because this plate looks different from a normal private vehicle." Marcus said nothing. Carter looked toward the SUV, then back at Tommy. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing," Tommy replied. "I'm just saying we should verify it before moving it." Carter seemed irritated by the suggestion. "I am the officer handling this stop. You are the tow operator." Tommy nodded. "Understood." He started walking back toward the SUV, But Marcus spoke again. "Mr. Hayes, please check the identification number through your dispatch system before you connect the truck." Tommy stopped. Carter turned toward Marcus. "That is enough. You have been given instructions." Marcus looked directly at him. "I'm not trying to interfere with your work. I'm trying to prevent a mistake." Carter took a breath and shook his head. "You have had several opportunities to explain yourself, and you keep making this complicated." Marcus remained calm. "I have explained everything you need to know. Then why are you so concerned about the tow?" Carter asked. Marcus looked at the SUV for a moment. "Because it is not what you think it is." Carter gave a short laugh. "I have heard that before." He turned to Tommy. "Start the tow." Tommy hesitated. He looked at the marking near the rear window again, then at the license plate. Something was not adding up. He pulled out his phone and contacted dispatch. A few seconds later, his expression changed. "Officer Carter," he said carefully, "I think you need to look at this record yourself." Carter walked over. Tommy held out the phone. Carter read the screen, and for the first time that morning, his confidence began to fade. The record did not identify the SUV as an ordinary privately owned vehicle. It contained a classification Carter had not expected to see. He looked at Marcus. Marcus said nothing. Carter looked back at the screen. Then he asked the question that would change the entire situation. "Who exactly do you work for?" For several seconds, Officer Daniel Carter stared at the information on Tommy Hayes' phone. Without saying a word, the confidence he had carried since the beginning of the traffic stop was suddenly replaced by uncertainty. "What classification is that?" Carter asked. Tommy looked at the screen again. "It is listed as a government vehicle." Carter frowned. "Government vehicle? That is what the record says." Carter took another look. The vehicle was not registered to Marcus Reed personally, and it was not connected to a private company either. The record pointed to a federal agency. Carter looked toward Marcus, who was still standing calmly beside the SUV. "You knew this was going to show up?" Carter said. Marcus nodded. "I knew the vehicle was properly authorized." Carter studied him. "Then why did you not tell me that from the beginning?" Marcus answered carefully. "Because you did not ask me to identify my employer. You asked for my license and registration. I gave you both." Carter looked uncomfortable. Tommy stepped away from the conversation, but he remained close enough to hear what was being said. "Officer," Tommy said, "I think we should stop the tow until this gets verified." Carter did not answer immediately. He looked at the SUV again. The small marking near the rear window suddenly seemed much more important than it had a few minutes earlier. "What federal agency?" he asked Marcus. Marcus did not answer directly. "The information is in the vehicle records." Carter looked at Tommy. "Can your dispatch confirm it?" Tommy nodded and made another call. While they waited, Carter returned to his cruiser and checked the license plate himself. This time, he entered the complete identification number instead of relying on the first information he had seen. The result appeared on his screen. Carter leaned closer. The vehicle was officially assigned to government use. There was also a contact number listed for authorized personnel. Carter picked up his radio, then stopped. He looked toward Marcus. "Are you authorized to operate this vehicle?" Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out a credential. He did not hand it over immediately. Instead, he held it where Carter could read the name and agency. "Marcus Reed?" Carter read quietly. Marcus nodded. "Yes." Carter's eyes moved across the credential again. Tommy watched the officer's expression change. Marcus was not simply an employee using a company vehicle. His authorization was connected directly to federal government operations. Carter looked at the tow truck and then back at Marcus. "Why are you in this area?" Marcus answered, "I am working." "Doing what?" Carter asked. Marcus paused. "That information is not something I can discuss on the side of the road." Carter's face tightened. He seemed ready to ask another question, but Tommy interrupted. "Officer, I think you should make that call now." Carter looked at the number listed in the vehicle record. He finally picked up his phone and dialed. The call connected after several rings. Carter identified himself and explained that he had stopped a government vehicle and was preparing to have it towed. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the person on the phone asked one simple question. "Where is the vehicle right now?" Carter gave the location. The response came immediately. "Do not move it." Carter looked at Marcus. Marcus remained silent. Then the voice on the phone added something that made Carter straighten in surprise. And before you do anything else, you need to speak with your supervisor. Officer Daniel Carter lowered his phone and looked toward the tow truck. Do not move it, he repeated. Tommy Hayes immediately stepped away from the equipment and waited beside his truck. Carter turned toward Marcus Reed, who was still standing calmly beside the black SUV. Why did they tell me to contact my supervisor? Carter asked. Marcus answered, because they know what the vehicle is being used for. Carter frowned. You could have told me that earlier. Marcus remained composed. I gave you the documents you requested. You decided what they meant before verifying everything. Carter looked away for a moment. The highway remained quiet, with cars passing several yards away as the situation continued to change. Carter finally reached for his phone and called Lieutenant Elena Brooks. She answered after a few rings. Brooks speaking. Lieutenant, this is Officer Carter. I have a traffic stop involving a government vehicle. There was a short pause. What agency? Carter provided the information from the vehicle record. Elena's voice became more serious. Where are you? Carter gave her the location. Do not authorize the tow, she said. I already stopped it. Good. Stay there until I arrive. Carter ended the call and placed his phone away. Tommy looked at Marcus. Are you expecting someone from your agency? Marcus replied. I am expecting the situation to be handled correctly. Carter heard the answer. You keep saying that. What exactly does that mean? Marcus looked at him. If there's a legitimate problem with the vehicle, it should be addressed. If there is not, the vehicle should remain where it is. Carter nodded slowly. And you believe there was no legitimate reason to stop you? Marcus paused. I believe everything should be verified before a decision is made. Those words seemed to stay with Carter. He remembered the beginning of the stop. He remembered seeing Marcus behind the wheel, asking questions, and deciding almost immediately that something was wrong. He had not yet checked the complete vehicle record when he called the tow company. He had not contacted his supervisor. He had not verified the information Marcus had asked him to verify. About 10 minutes later, another patrol vehicle arrived. Lieutenant Elena Brooks stepped out and walked toward Carter. She was calm, professional, and clearly focused on understanding what had happened. Daniel, give me the full story from the beginning. Carter explained the traffic stop, the registration concern, his conversation with Marcus, and his decision to request a tow. Elena listened carefully without interrupting. When he finished, she looked toward Tommy. Did you begin moving the vehicle? No, don't me please. I stopped when the vehicle record showed government ownership. Elena nodded and turned toward Marcus. Mr. Reed, did you provide the documents requested by the officer? Yes, Lieutenant. Elena looked back at Carter. Then why was the vehicle being towed? Carter hesitated. I believe there was a registration issue. Elena looked down at the documents in her hand. Did you verify that issue before ordering the tow? Carter paused. I believed I had. Elena raised her eyes. That is not what I asked. Carter remained silent for a moment. The question was simple, but it exposed the problem. He had acted on an assumption before confirming the facts. Elena looked at him again. Did you verify the registration issue before calling the tow company? Carter finally answered, no. Tommy looked toward the ground. Marcus said nothing. Elena slowly closed the folder. Then we need to discuss why. Carter knew the conversation had changed. This was no longer simply about a vehicle on the side of a highway. It was about the decisions he had made before he knew the full story, and now his supervisor wanted every one of those decisions explained. Lieutenant Elena Brooks looked at Officer Daniel Carter for several seconds after his admission. You ordered a tow before verifying the registration issue, she said. Carter nodded. Yes, Lieutenant. Elena looked at the documents again. And when Mr. Reed asked you to verify the vehicle record, what did you do? Carter hesitated. I told him I knew how to do my job. Elena's expression remained serious. That was not my question. Carter took a breath. I did not verify it at that time. Tommy Hayes stood quietly beside his tow truck, listening but staying out of the conversation. Marcus Reed remained near the SUV, his hands relaxed at his sides. Elena turned toward him. Mr. Reed, I want to make sure I understand something. When Officer Carter first stopped you, did you explain that the vehicle belonged to a government agency? Marcus answered carefully. I explained that it belonged to my employer and that I had the required documents. Elena nodded. Did he ask you for anything else? He asked where I was going and why I was driving the vehicle. I answered both questions. Carter looked uncomfortable. Elena turned back to him. Did you have any information suggesting the vehicle was stolen, improperly registered, or unauthorized? Carter shook his head. No. Did you have any information suggesting Mr. Reed had committed a crime? No, Elena pose. Then what caused you to believe the vehicle needed to be towed? Carter looked toward the SUV. The registration did not appear to match his name. Marcus spoke quietly. Because the vehicle is not registered to me personally. Elena nodded, and that information was visible in the records. Carter said nothing. Elena continued. So the central issue was that the vehicle was not registered to the driver, even though the driver provided documentation showing that he was authorized to operate it. Carter looked down. Yes. Elena closed the folder and stepped slightly away from the group. Daniel, I need you to understand why this matters. A registration question can be resolved with verification. It does not automatically justify removing a vehicle from the road. Carter nodded. I understand. Marcus remained silent. Elena looked at him. Mr. Reed, I apologize for the delay. We will verify the vehicle status and make sure you are free to continue your work. Marcus gave a small nod. Thank you. Carter glanced at Marcus. You said you were working for a federal agency. What kind of assignment are you on? Marcus looked at Elena before answering. I can provide that information to the appropriate supervisor. Elena noticed the careful wording. Is there something about this assignment that requires confidentiality? Marcus nodded. Yes. Carter looked surprised. Until that moment, he had treated the encounter as a routine roadside stop. Now he was beginning to understand that the vehicle, the paperwork, and Marcus's quiet confidence were connected to something much larger. Elena turned toward Carter. I want the vehicle record printed, the original dispatch information documented, and the reason for the stop entered exactly as it happened. Carter nodded. Understood. Elena added, and I want the body camera footage preserved. Carter looked at her. What? Elena answered calmly. Because we need an accurate record of the entire interaction. Marcus said nothing, but he knew the footage would answer questions that no explanation could. Carter returned to his cruiser to retrieve the necessary information. As he opened the door, his radio suddenly came alive. A dispatcher called his name and told him there was an incoming call from federal office regarding the vehicle. Carter froze for a moment. He looked back at Elena. She gave him a serious nod. Answer it. Carter picked up the radio. The next voice he heard would reveal why Marcus Reed had been driving that government vehicle through their town in the first place. Officer Daniel Carter held the radio for another moment after the federal office ended the call. He looked toward Lieutenant Elena Brooks, who was standing beside the patrol vehicle with her arms folded. They confirmed everything, Carter said. The vehicle is authorized, the registration is correct, and Marcus Reed is conducting federal work in the area. Elena nodded. Then the tow is finished before it ever started. Carter looked toward Tommy Hayes. Cancel it. Tommy nodded and walked back toward his truck. Already canceled. Marcus remained beside the black SUV, watching quietly as the tow truck prepared to leave. Elena approached him. Mr. Reed, I want to apologize for the delay. The vehicle is cleared to continue. Marcus gave a polite nod. Thank you. Carter looked at Marcus and took a slow breath. I owe you an apology, too. Marcus turned toward him. For what? Carter answered. For assuming the vehicle was unauthorized before I verified the records. Marcus studied him for a moment. I appreciate you saying that. Carter nodded. You asked me to verify the plate, and I should have done it immediately. Marcus replied. That would have saved everyone a lot of time. Tommy climbed into his truck and prepared to leave, but before starting the engine, he looked toward Marcus. I'm glad we checked the record. Marcus smiled slightly. So am I. The tow truck pulled away, leaving the black SUV exactly where it had been from the beginning. The immediate problem appeared to be over, but Lieutenant Brooks was not finished. She turned toward Carter. We still need to document the stop. Carter nodded. Understood. I want the reason for the stop recorded exactly as it happened. I also want the time you requested the tow, the time the vehicle record was verified, and the information you received from the federal office. Carter reached for his notepad. All of it. Elena looked at him. All of it. Carter began writing. For the first time, he was forced to reconstruct the encounter from the beginning without relying on assumptions. He wrote down the time he first saw Marcus, the location of the stop, the questions he asked, the documents Marcus provided, and the moment he decided the vehicle needed to be towed. As he wrote, Carter noticed something that bothered him. There was a gap between what he had assumed and what he had actually verified. That gap had been enough to turn a simple roadside check into a serious administrative issue. Marcus watched from several feet away while checking his phone. A message from his federal supervisor had arrived. It instructed him to continue his assignment and provide a complete account of the interaction. Marcus read the message twice. He looked toward Carter, then toward Elena. The situation was not finished after all. Elena noticed Marcus's expression. "Is everything all right?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, but my supervisor wants a report about the stop." Carter looked up from his notes. "A report?" Marcus answered, "Yes." Carter seemed surprised. "Why?" Marcus paused before replying. "Because the federal office wants to understand why a properly authorized government vehicle was almost removed from the road after the driver provided valid documentation." Carter lowered his eyes. Elena looked at him carefully. "That is a reasonable question." Carter knew she was right. The federal office was not interested in punishing anyone simply because of a misunderstanding. They wanted to know how the misunderstanding happened in the first place. Marcus opened the driver's door, but did not get inside yet. He turned toward Carter and said, "Officer, I hope you understand something." Carter looked at him. "What?" Marcus replied calmly. "The problem was never that you asked questions. The problem was that you stopped looking for answers." Carter remained silent. Marcus entered the SUV and closed the door. As the engine started, Carter watched the government vehicle merge back on a highway. He thought about Marcus's words. Then Elena spoke from beside him. "Daniel, we need to talk about what happened before that vehicle leaves this county." Carter looked at her. He knew the next conversation would be very different from the traffic stop that had started. All Lieutenant Elena Brooks waited until the black SUV disappeared into traffic before turning back toward Officer Daniel Carter. "Get in the cruiser," she said. Carter followed her inside, still thinking about the conversation that had just ended. Elena opened her notes. "I want you to walk me through the first 5 minutes of the stop. Start with what you did, not what you believed." Carter took a breath. "I saw the vehicle, stopped it, requested the driver's license and registration, and asked where he was going." "Did Mr. Reed cooperate?" "Yes." "Did he provide the documents?" "Yes." "Did he refuse any request?" Carter shook his head. "No." Elena looked at him. "Then when did you decide something was wrong?" Carter paused. "When he told me the vehicle was not registered to him." "Did he explain why?" "Yes." "He said it belonged to his employer." "Did he provide documentation?" "Yes." Elena leaned back slightly. "So what made you believe the vehicle was unauthorized?" Carter looked through the windshield. "The registration did not make sense to me." Elena nodded slowly. "That is different from saying the registration was invalid." Carter knew the distinction mattered. He had seen something unusual, interpreted it as suspicious, and then treated that interpretation as fact. Elena opened the patrol computer and brought up the body camera footage. "Let's watch it from the beginning." Carter watched himself approach the black SUV. He saw Marcus Reed lower the window, provide his documents, and answer every question. Then he heard himself say, "This vehicle is not registered to you." Marcus calmly explained that it belonged to his employer. Carter watched the moment Marcus asked, "Did you verify the plate?" Then came Carter's own response. "I know how to do my job." The words sounded different when he heard them without the pressure of the moment. Elena remained silent. The footage continued. Marcus never raised his voice. He never refused to cooperate. He repeatedly asked Carter to verify the information. Carter watched himself dismiss those requests and then call the tow company. When the footage ended, Elena looked at him. "What do you see?" Carter took a moment before answering. "I made a decision before I had all the facts." Elena nodded. "Anything else?" Carter looked down. "I was convinced there was a problem, even though I had not confirmed it." Elena closed the recording. "That is what we need to examine." Carter remained quiet. After several seconds, he asked, "Do you think I treated him differently because he was black?" Elena did not answer immediately. I think that is an important question, and the complete record needs to be reviewed before anyone reaches a conclusion. Carter nodded. Elena continued. But there's another concern. Mr. Reed's assignment may explain why the federal office is taking this seriously. Carter looked at her. What exactly was he doing here? Elena shook her head. I do not know yet. Her phone rang. She answered and listened. Her expression became more serious with every second. Finally, she said, Understood. We will be there. She ended the call and looked at Carter. That was the federal office. Carter waited. They reviewed the initial information, Elena said. They want a formal meeting with our department. Carter frowned. Because of the traffic stop? Elena nodded. Partly. She paused before adding, They also told me something else. Marcus Reed was not simply passing through this county for routine work. Carter looked at her carefully. Then why was he here? Elena's answer was quiet. He was here because his federal assignment involved reviewing an operation connected to this area. Carter stared at her. Suddenly, the stop seemed far more significant than he'd realized. Elena continued, and according to the federal office, the information he was collecting may include concerns about how local procedures are being followed. Carter looked down at the notes in his hands. The irony was impossible to ignore. The man he had nearly sent away in a tow truck had been conducting an assignment related to accountability and proper procedure. Now the federal office wanted to know exactly what had happened during the stop. Elena opened the cruiser door. We have a meeting to prepare for. Carter stepped out behind her. For the first time that day, he understood that the real question was no longer whether Marcus had been authorized to drive the vehicle. The question was why Carter had been so certain he was wrong before he ever took the time to find out. The federal meeting was scheduled for the following morning at the county administration building. By 8:30, Lieutenant Elena Brooks and Officer Daniel Carter were seated in a small conference room, waiting for representatives from the federal office. Carter had barely spoken since arriving. He kept thinking about the traffic stop and the moment he had told Marcus Reed that he knew how to do his job. At 9 o'clock, the door opened, and a federal supervisor named Michael Grant entered with a folder in his hand. He greeted Elena first, then looked at Carter. Officer Carter, I understand you're the officer who stopped Mr. Reed yesterday. Yes, sir. Michael placed the folder on the table. Before we discuss the assignment, I want to make something clear. Mr. Reed was not sent here to investigate individual officers. His assignment concerns compliance procedures connected to several government operations in this county. Carter listened carefully. Elena asked, Then why is the traffic stop part of the review? Michael opened the folder. Because the stop created an unexpected record of how a government vehicle and its authorized driver were treated when the officer did not initially understand the vehicle's status. Carter looked down. Michael continued. We reviewed the dispatch information, the vehicle records, and the body camera footage. Carter's expression tightened. You reviewed the footage already? Yes. Michael turned toward him. And we noticed something important. Mr. Reed repeatedly asked you to verify the vehicle information. You declined to do so until after the tow had already been requested. Carter nodded. That is correct. Michael did not sound angry. That almost made the conversation more uncomfortable. We are not here to embarrass you, Officer Carter. We are here to understand the decision-making process. Elena spoke up. Our department has begun its own review. Michael nodded. That is appropriate. He opened another document. There is also a second matter. Carter looked up. What matter? Michael explained that Marcus Reed had been reviewing procedures involving government vehicles, documentation, and interactions with local agencies. The purpose was to determine whether established rules were being applied consistently. Carter asked, Was the traffic stop part of that assignment? Michael shook his head. No, the stop was completely unrelated. That is why it became useful as an independent example. Carter looked confused. Useful? Michael nodded. Yes, because nobody planned it. Nobody knew Mr. Reed was involved in a federal review when the stop occurred. That means the interaction gives us a natural example of how an officer responds when the driver's identity and the purpose of the vehicle are not immediately obvious. Elena looked toward Carter. That is exactly what we need to understand. Michael opened the final section of the folder. There is one more thing. He placed a printed report on the table. A civilian witness contacted the county after seeing the tow truck arrive. The witness provided additional information about the conversation before the tow was canceled. Carter looked at the report. What did the witness say? Michael answered, "The witness said you appear to have decided the vehicle was unauthorized before checking the full record." Carter leaned back. He knew the statement was consistent with what the body camera had already shown. Michael continued, "The witness also said Mr. Reed remained calm and repeatedly asked for verification." Carter nodded slowly. "That is accurate." Elena looked at him. "Daniel, this is your opportunity to explain what you were thinking." Carter looked down at his hands. "I saw a black man driving a vehicle that was not registered in his name. I thought something was wrong. I let that assumption guide the rest of the stop." The room became quiet. Carter had finally said aloud what he had been avoiding since the previous morning. Michael closed the folder. "That level of honesty matters." Carter looked up. "What happens now?" Michael answered, "The department will complete its review. We will provide our findings to the appropriate federal office, and any necessary training or corrective action will follow." Carter nodded. But before the meeting ended, Michael added one final sentence. "Officer Carter, the most important part of this case is not that you almost towed a government vehicle. It is that you almost acted on an assumption before checking the facts. That can happen to anyone, but recognizing it is how you prevent it from happening again." Carter sat quietly, understanding that the real consequence of the encounter was not the canceled tow. It was being forced to confront a judgment he had made before he had all the information 3 days after the traffic stop. Officer Daniel Carter sat across from Lieutenant Elena Brooks in the same conference room where the review had begun. The department had completed its examination of the body camera footage, dispatch records, vehicle documentation, and witness statement. The conclusion was clear. Carter had not verified the registration before ordering the tow, and his decision had been influenced by an assumption about Marcus Reed and the vehicle he was driving. Elena placed the final report on the table. "Daniel, the department is requiring additional training on verification procedures, professional judgment, and recognizing unconscious bias." Carter nodded. "I understand." Elena continued, "You will also receive a formal counseling notice for failing to follow the proper verification process." Carter accepted the decision without argument. "That is fair." Elena studied him for a moment. "What have you learned from this?" Carter thought carefully before answering. "That being confident is not the same as being correct." Elena nodded. "Go on." Carter looked down at the report. "I saw a situation that looked unusual to me. Instead of slowing down and checking the facts, I decided what the situation meant. Once I made that decision, everything else seemed to confirm it." Elena remained quiet. Carter continued, "I did not realize how much my first impression was affecting the way I treated Mr. Reed." Later that afternoon, Carter saw Marcus again. The federal investigator had returned to the county administration building to complete his assignment. Carter approached him, but this time he stopped several feet away. "Mr. Reed." Marcus turned. "Officer Carter." Carter nodded. "I wanted to speak with you before you leave the county." Marcus waited. "The department completed its review," Carter said. "I received formal counseling and additional training will be required." Marcus nodded. "I heard there was a review." Carter took a breath. "I also wanted to apologize again. Not because the tow was canceled, and not because your vehicle belonged to the government. I was wrong because I made an assumption about you before I had enough information." Marcus looked at him for several seconds. "That distinction matters." Carter nodded. "I understand that now," Marcus replied. "Then hopefully something good comes from it." Carter asked, "What do you mean?" Marcus said, "The next person you stop may not have the documents I had. They may not know exactly what to say. They may be nervous. They may look different from the people you're used to seeing. If you start with the facts instead of an assumption, you give everyone a fair chance." Carter listened carefully. "You are right." Marcus gave a small nod and walked toward the building. Carter watched him leave, then returned to his patrol vehicle. Before starting the engine, he looked at the notes from the original traffic stop. One sentence stood out more than anything else. "Did you verify the plate?" Marcus had asked that question calmly, without anger or accusation. At the time, Carter had heard it as a challenge. Now he understood that it had been an opportunity to stop, verify the facts, and prevent the entire situation from escalating. The government vehicle had never needed to be towed. Marcus had never needed to argue. The tow truck had never needed to move. The entire situation could have ended within minutes if Carter had simply checked the information before making a decision. That was the lesson he carried forward. Authority was not about proving that you were right. It was about being responsible enough to make sure you were right before acting. And sometimes the most important thing an officer could do was not make a faster decision, but take one more moment to ask a simple question. What are the facts?